Hey guys, this is Dr. Sean over at, well, I'm at the Natural BodyWorks, but today we're going to work on some of the anatomy and physiology stuff, and we're going to be working on actually the skin, the integumentary system. So we're going to go through a bunch of stuff. This is going to follow different books. I mean, this is the book that I've been using, The Human Body in Health and Illness. We also have The Human Body in Health and Disease, and Anatomy and Physiology Fundamentals here, and the other one here, which I have, Principles of Human Anatomy. This is a really good book by Gerard Tortora. Really good book, this one. The other ones are pretty good as well. These are the ones that I teach from in my anatomy and physiology college level classes for different colleges. But this is kind of the overview of everything you would want to know, but we're afraid to ask about integumentary system. So let's watch, okay? So this is what you're going to learn today. The epidermis, dermis, subcutaneous or subdural, whatever you want to call it, or subdermal, whatever you want to call it. Melanocytes, what dermatology is, what a follicle is, how they work, sebaceous glands, albinism. Albinism, it's being overly no color in the skin. We'll talk about how color works and why it works. We'll talk about inflammation of the skin. We'll also talk about what keratin is and how one becomes keratinized, serous membranes, as well as we're going to look at the mucous membranes. Now, the serous membranes and mucous membranes, remember, those are the ones that we've talked about in different classes. So synovial membranes generally around the joints, and we'll draw that up in a little bit. And then mucous membranes all have to do with the openings. This is about cutaneous membranes. So what I'll do in some of the cases, I'll take my picture out of the whole thing and we'll just go on from there. So let's see if we can get to the next slide here and how we're doing. So facts about your skin. The skin is a giant organ. It's one of the largest organs you have. It's about 15% of your body weight. So if you weigh 200 pounds, that's what 200 times 0.15 equals 30, right? 30 pounds. 30 pounds of skin if you're a 200-pound person in general. I mean, if you're bigger, you have more, of course, like that, right? Okay, that makes sense. Performs a lot of different functions. We're always talking about form and function in these kind of things. So the form we'll get into, that's going to be the different layers and the different kinds of cells. And then we're going to get into function, which is what it does for you. Number one, it keeps all the stuff on the outside, and all the stuff on the inside, and that maintains the integrity of the body, right? It also keeps fluid on the inside and keeps fluid from getting on the inside, because we don't want to imbalance those things too much. We have a whole section on where the water goes. I'll do that in another video. Let's see, what else? Protects your body from outside influences like diseases and dirt and lint. It would be really terrible to get lint on your muscles, right? I mean, you'd just be all sticky and gooey. This keeps it dry. So there's a waterproofing effect to the skin. Okay. Also helps you regulate body heat by either, if you get too hot, you sweat, and that the air then evaporates, or the heat evaporates the sweat, and it makes the skin cooler, or you can shiver, or you can little hairs on your arms can stand up like that. That's how we end up staying warm or cold with our skin. The skin also has a huge surface area which allows to radiate the heat off of us. Okay, so if we start getting warm, we get too much buildup of heat, we can go into heat shock, heat stroke, or even we can die from that. So just hyperthermia basically is what it is. Hypothermia, again, is just coldness. Okay, so integumentary, my dear Watson. And the reason I did that is because I ended up watching Sherlock Holmes the other day, so that's why I decided to watch this. But let's talk about your skin more. The outer layer of your skin is called the epidermis. Epi means on top of, derma means skin, basically, is what it is. It's found all over the body, thickest on your palms and feet, where it can be like 1.5 millimeters, and so very, very thin through this area, through the eyelids, gets thicker on the front, and then even thicker on the back. Now, Interesting thing, as a female and males, as we hit puberty, there's some changes, and the male skin gets thicker. And that's probably because we're, I guess, supposed to run around on thorns or something. I don't know. But the skin on males is thicker than it is on females. And females, it's obviously thinner, so they tend to show more of the vascularity. They can show more of the changes in vascularity, like blushing and things like that. A rhinoceros's skin is about 1.5 centimeters to 1.5 to 5 centimeters deep. Now, how big is a centimeter? A centimeter is about this far on me. So I mean, for me, it's about that far on me. So it's about a centimeter, I guess. And so that's the 1.5 of those. So that's about that thick, in relation, or maybe that thick, maybe up on its back. They're very well guarded. They're well armored. They're considered the thickest skinned animals we got, right? So serous membranes, there's different membranes. There's 3 different kinds of membranes that we have. Serous membranes, synovial membranes, and cutaneous membranes. So here we're going to talk about the serous membranes, line body cavities that have no openings. So if you remember, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my picture away and I'm going to talk over while I'm drawing here. So if we remember, we have the diaphragm. The diaphragm separates the thoracic cavity from the abdominal pelvic. Okay, that's down here. Now down below, which we cannot really see, we've got a few different layers of this. So we have the lungs in here, right? We're going to put 2 lungs like this. And on the inside of that, we've got the parietal pleura. Okay, if you remember this from way back, this is the parietal, which means the inside of the wall. Pleura, which means lung, right? Okay, so we have parietal, and then around the lung itself, we can do the lung in this color. Pretend these are lungs, just make them like this shape. And around the lung, we're going to have a different kind of tissue called the visceral pleura. Okay, this is going to be the parietal. This is the visceral. Okay, now the interesting thing about these, so for the lung, let's take the lung like this. Now we have a little, we're going to do, pretend this is the right lung. Okay, and it does connect, right? We have the bronchioles, we have all the big vessels and all this kind of stuff. So we have the bronchi, which attach to the trachea and all that jazz. We'll get into that later. And we have the large vessels. Now, remember we were talking about, let's do this in a totally different color. The parietal, or the visceral pleura. The visceral pleura goes like this. Okay, probably make it thicker, but this is going to work for now. So this is the visceral pleura. Now the visceral pleura then curves about. We're going to make it a different color. Oh, let's make it a little bit more orange. We're going to make it thicker. It turns into the parietal pleura, like this. And that goes all the way down. You can't see it down there, but it goes all the way down and then reconnects. So if we draw the whole thing, it's going to look like this. Okay, there we go. We have the actual lung itself, the viscera, and then we have the, what do we call that? We have the visceral pleura here and the parietal pleura there. So that's the pleura. This is the pleura, which means lung. Okay, that's our lung tissue one. Okay, that's our. Now what happens is in here, in this space, this has nothing to do with the other part of the class, but we're going to go over it anyway. This is the serous fluid. Okay, when these 2 points contact each other and they move around, they create serous fluid. The next one we would have would be, of course, the heart. So we would have the cardiac. Okay, here's the cardiac, here's the great vessels that come out of it, and they go all over the place like this. And we have here, we're going to do it actually in red, I guess. And we're going to do right around the heart itself is the visceral pericardium. Okay, so this is the heart. Okay, and then this is called the visceral pericardium. This does the same stuff as the pleura in that it's a serous membrane and it makes serous fluid. And around the outside here, we have the parietal. For those of you who spent IAL, parietal pericardium. Okay. Now the pericardium itself protects the heart. Inside here is called the pericardial space. Okay, and there's serous fluid in there, which helps lubricate the heart and allows it to pump in its little space there. Okay, the last one we have here, we're going to draw this above here. This is the diaphragm. And remember, this is our lungs, and this is our thorax. Okay, well, okay, this is the abdominal pelvic cavity, and in the abdominal pelvic cavity, we're going to have, which we're going to do in blue, we're going to have the parietal peritoneum. Okay, it goes all the way like this, and it surrounds the inside of the wall. It's called parietal. You see the theory here. Parietal means wall, peritoneum. Okay, and then around all the guts and everything like that, we're going to do in green, is we have the, let's say this goes like this because it's going to cover everything, whatever. We're just making stuff up. Okay, this is going to be the visceral peritoneum. And inside, we're going to do in yellow, these are all the intestines. Okay, they're all squiggled around in here, and they're covered by this kind of membrane. Now, in between here is, of course, going to be the parietal, or the peritoneal space, and that's where the synovial fluid is made, again, or the serous fluid, sorry, is made, and it helps lubricate the entire thing inside. Okay, there we go. Okay, so there we go. That was basically the serous membranes and deals with those. I just wanted to draw it so I would look at the computer and not be able to draw it. Mucous membranes are a little bit different. Mucous membranes all have what we got here. They all have different openings to the body. Now there's sensory openings. Let's do this. Sensory. And that's going to be the eyes, right? That's going to be the ears, nose, mouth. Okay, that's all these ones up through here, and those have mucous membranes. Mucous membrane is a little bit different. It's has a different epithelium. It makes mucus instead of serous fluid or synovial fluid. Remember, the joints make synovial fluid. The serous membranes around the heart, the lungs, the intestines make serous fluid, and this makes mucus. Okay, and then we have reproductive, and digestive, and urinary. All of these openings here will have specialized cells that make mucus. Okay, so let's go on to the next one. That brings us to synovial membranes. Now, synovial membranes are like the synovial membranes that are inside the different joints. Now, where a joint meets, let's take a finger, we have little bones, right? Those bones look something like this. And these would be called, of course, your phalanges. So your phalanges, you have a distal, a medial, and a proximal, and we'll get into those when we get back into other stuff in there. And here's the nail, of course. And around each of these is a different kind of capsule. There's a little capsule that goes around like this on each of these. It's the joint capsule. And inside, there's one back here too, and inside that joint capsule is where we have this synovial membrane. It goes like this. There's no other thing in between those. It's just a little membrane. That's why you can crack your knuckles when you're able to cavitate them, basically, and open up a small little air pocket in there, and it pops, and that's the sound you get. And there's one of these around each one of these. And in this side here, each end of this bone is hyaline cartilage. And hyaline cartilage is the most common type of cartilage we have. And there's that pocket of area in there called a synovial capsule, and it makes synovial fluid. Now you can have buildup of the synovial fluid, and where that occurs is things like in your knee, or maybe even the bursa, which is a small bursa is like a Ziploc baggie filled with a little bit of oil, and what that does is enables for gliding. Okay, you have those in your knees and your hips and your elbows and your shoulders and stuff like that. Okay, So getting back to the facts here. So more skin facts. It helps. We talked about temperature regulation. We talked about reducing water loss, housing the sensory organs. It doesn't sense things. It just houses the ends of nerves so we can feel things, like on our face. They're very close together in the face and on the fingers. They're less close together here on the hands and on the back. So you can actually do little experiments with those. But we'll get into that in neurology, which is a few chapters from now. So it does make some chemicals. Now it does make sweat. And it does make sebaceous oils, and it even makes some little like pheromones, which we don't really know much about and nobody really likes to talk about, but that's what makes you stink. Not stink, but smell, and that can change hormone levels in the person next to you that's smelling you. It's kind of an interesting thing. It does excrete waste too. It's one of the second largest excretion of waste organs there is. I mean, other than your intestines, because your intestines bring in nutrients and get rid of waste. Your skin does the same kind of thing. It does get rid of some salts, some acids, and stuff like that. Your kidneys do the same thing, of course, in your liver, and everybody works together to get rid of this stuff you don't need. So, and like I said before, it accounts for about 15% of your body weight. We already know that. So if you weigh 100 pounds, that's 15 pounds. And if you weigh 200 pounds, that's 30 pounds of skin is yours. Thinnest on this. Oh, there you go. Thinnest on the eyelids, about 1.02 millimeters thick. Much thinner than we thought before, right? So let's go to the next one. Your skin sheds about 30 to 40,000 cells every minute of the day. That's up to 4 kilograms. So that's like 8 pounds, almost 9 pounds of skin a year. They say in your lifetime that your skin would fill up an entire 2-story house, which is pretty gross, piled up like snow on the sides. That's all the skin in your whole lifetime. So the dust in your house is actually mostly dead skin cells. And what happens is those slough off and they end up in the air, and that's dander, right? Dander of humans and dander of animals. Now, sometimes you breathe it in, you can get sick. Or not get sick, but you have your allergic reactions to it. Okay, lifetime. Yeah, ugh, that's so bad. 50% of the dust in your house is skin cells. So if you move into a new house, that's somebody else's skin. That's so gross. So in the time it took me to read this, you lost about 30,000 skin cells. They fell off you and ended up God knows where else. Okay, so this is another one that I'm going to bounce out of because I'm going to draw the 3 layers of skin. Right, and this is a cube, so we can see 3-dimensionally. Let's imagine we took out a very small little section of our skin, and we decide, and this is the surface. This section here is the surface. So we're going to have little hairs that come out of it, for example, and maybe we're going to put one here too, because we want to see what those hairs look like as we draw around them. So we're going to have inside that, it's going to come down like this, and it's going to go like this. And this is going to be our root of our nerve right there. This is going to be this is a hair, okay, and this is going to be the shaft, of course, and then we have in here the root. Around the pocket around it, called the follicle, okay, and there's a little root, it's all connected down in through here, and then there's going to be, of course, a gland attached to it. This is a sebaceous gland, okay. We'll talk about that. Sebaceous gland, and that sebaceous gland makes an oil which coats the hair and keeps it healthy. Also keeps it from getting bacterial or fungal infections and stuff like that. Other things that are in here, now we have to look at the rest of the layers as well. We're going to do this first layer is going to be the epidermis. Okay? Epidermis does have other layers. We'll go over those in a couple minutes. And what happens is those skin cells become keratinized and become waterproof as the main defense layer against everything that's in the body. Okay, continuing on here, we're going to look at there's a little muscle that attaches like this to the hair cell, okay, way down in through here, and it attaches up into the epidermis from this area in here. Remember, this is the dermis. That's this section, okay, and then down below it, this is also a subdermal. Okay, it says dermis. Now, the key to all of this is most everything is in the dermis. Almost everything is in the dermis. Here's some other things that we'll have done as we're in there. We're going to have, of course, blood vessels that come up. right? Those travel through this whole area. We're going to have veins that come back to other areas, right? Like this, and they usually kind of follow the arteries. Okay, and we're also going to have some glands, maybe some other sweat glands. Okay, and then of course there's going to be all kinds of nerves. Okay, and nerves are going to go to all these different structures all over inside here. So there's quite a bit of stuff in here. There's going to be glands, sebaceous gland, nerve fibers, sweat glands, blood vessels, adipose tissues, all kinds of stuff. There are little openings here called pores, P-O-R-E-S. Okay, there we go. That's the whole list of all of the things that you would find in there. Follow that along in your book. You can kind of do a little drawing of your own if you like, and that would kind of help you learn those things a little bit better. Let's go here and we'll erase all of this. So this part here, remember we're talking about and we're going to have these different layers, which we're going to do in different colors. So we're going to do way at the bottom, we're going to do, this is the stratum basale, the base. Basale means base, that's all it means. And this is our area where to get everything to start to grow. Okay, also could be called maybe stratum germinativum. Okay, so sometimes it's also called, and that means it germinates from there. So the cells are going to grow this way. And as they grow up, they're going to become a little bit different. Stratum spinosum. Okay, we're going because it kind of looks like spiny. Okay, we're going to do a little spiny there. Spinosum. These little spines here. That's the stratum spinosum, so that's that one there. Now the next one is the granulosum. Now the granulosum just means that it starts to look a little more granular looking cells. Grainy under the microscope. And this is as these little skin cells are developing and differentiating and becoming skin cells, right? As they work their way out, they're working their way towards the top. Now, the stratum lucidium would be the next one, okay? It's on the palms. We're going to talk about that one a little bit. Let's do it in green. And we're going to do, this is kind of a thicker part of the skin. And then our last one is going to be, is our stratum corneum. Cornea. Cornice means edge, okay, or top. The cornice of everything. That's our stratum corneum. Now these become, as they grow, they lose their nucleus and their ability to regrow and repair, and they become keratinized. Now keratin is a protein that is waterproofing. So everything gets gotten rid of. You get rid of the other organelles and you start developing keratin. That's how this thing goes. So here we're going to draw, let's just pretend this is the outside of the skin. And so there's our epidermis here. And just below that, you're going to have these cells, and this is totally not to size, guys, that are like these little, kind of like this, melanocytes, make these little pigments called melanin. Okay, that's just right here. It protects deeper cells from the sun's ultraviolet rays. Melanocytes pass melanin to nearby cells, so it passes these little droplets of melanin to different areas. Now, some of us, we may have many more melanin granules in there. Generally, we have about the same number of melanocytes, whether you're pasty white or really dark black, it doesn't really matter. But what happens is the number and sizes of these little granules is greater, so that someone who has, for example, very many close together granules, they're preventing the UV radiation, which we're going to do in this one here. UV radiation is bouncing off, okay? Whereas this guy, someone over here, some of it gets through. And that causes a burn. Okay, we did a little sparklies in there. Melanocytes do help protect you. And one of the things that happens is the quantity, okay, and quality of it is because of your sun exposure, okay? The more exposure you have, the darker you're going to get. This is the Earth. pretend it's the Earth. This is the atmosphere. Okay, this is the atmosphere right here. We're going to do it double thick just because I want to show what's going on here. Way over here is the sun. When UV rays go like this and they approach this section right here, this is the equator, it only has that much space to go through. If the sun rays are coming up through here, Northern Europe, for example, it has to go from here all the way to here. That's much difference. This might be 2 times the size. Let's say it's 2 times. Okay, this is going to be 1x. It's going to be 2x. And as someone who is way up here, okay, way up high up there, it's going to be even more. So that the people who get UV from this section are more. Okay, more UV. A lot more UV. What happens is, as the people from this area down here started to migrate towards this area, they didn't need as much melanin. Why do you, or much melanin? Because they didn't have as much exposure to UV. Why? Okay. We need vitamin D. Okay, vitamin D. If you don't have this, you can't make a lot of your hormones. If you can't make some neurotransmitters, it's more difficult. You need to supplement this from your diet. So the people down here didn't want to get more UV radiation because it would burn them. So they covered up because they were making way more than enough vitamin D. The guys up here didn't have enough vitamin D, so they lost some of their melanin so that they could make more vitamin D. And that's why, folks, people have different colors. See right here, skin appeared about 20 to 50,000 years ago as dark-skinned humans migrated to colder climates and lost much of their melanin pigment. Okay, but then when you lose it all, you end up as an albino. Albinos are often cast in movies, and the Da Vinci Code, Die Another Day, Matrix Reloaded, and Josie and the Pussycats. I don't know why that's in there. This Dr. Robert Lima of Penn State suggests these people associated pale-skinned albinos with vampires and other dead people and creatures of the night. So, because when someone dies, their skin loses the color because the blood has rushed away, and they look lighter colored, more grayish, or even white, pale. People that have albinism have no or little melanin. Therefore, okay, increased UV exposure, okay, light bothers them because even the around the iris, here's a pupil, this area through here will have no pigment. There's your eye, right? You'll have no pigment there, and that'll be either a light blue or maybe even a pinkish color, and so that all the light will really bother them. Now they also won't have the melanin in their hair, and there's other issues. Sometimes they have eye problems, they can't see as well, but quite an interesting look actually. Now interestingly enough, in some parts of old, or I don't even know if old Africa, but I mean some parts of Africa, it was seen as kind of someone had magic, and what would happen was people who were albinos were often taken and put into pieces, and their bones were ground up to make certain medicines for things for rich people. It doesn't make any sense because it didn't help the albino person. How would it help somebody else? So it's just a weird old folk kind of thing, especially in the areas of some parts of Africa. They say it still happens, but I don't know about that. Now, more things about skin. If we look at skin, we talk about things like books and belt buckles and even sheaths of swords. Now, even William Wallace was said to have made a belt of one of the guys he killed. I can't remember, the Earl of somebody or whatever. He made a belt of his skin. In the Cleveland Public Library and Harvard Law School and Brown University all have books clad in skin, stripped from executed criminals or from the poor. I guess they didn't need it as much as everybody else. And there's even some points where you will have things like there's these Tibetan drums, which kind of look like this. Okay, they kind of look like that, and they have strings this way and this way. And the skin of the drum is actually a person's skin, usually of a monk or something like that. Now, sometimes they would even make bowls out of the skull and things like that. But this is human skin, probably kind of oily, I would assume. And also we have to remember that in the in the Holocaust, there was many experiments done by the Nazis to use some human skin for lampshades and other such things like wallets and stuff, which is pretty gruesome. Anyway, so there you go. So there's interesting facts. You can look up those like there on National Geographic. You can find some of that kind of stuff. And here's one of the most interesting ones that I found is this stuff here. This is called Nabrok, okay, which is this is really weird. This is from Iceland. This is an old tradition. I'm not sure how real it is, but there's a real actual pair of those pants right there. Those are skinny jeans. Yes, that's hair on the outside. You can find this. They're called necropants. What you'd have to do would write a letter, you know, dear pal, you can use my skin as pants when I die. Now what they had to do is they had to dig you up. There we go. And so you'd have to go and dig your friend's body up, and you'd have to take the legs and pants, the whole thing, from the pants down, or whatever, I guess that's the belly button down, something like that, without breaking through the skin. So you'd have to, you know, tease away the flesh and peel it all off, and then you would wear them apparently during ceremonies, but I'm not sure. And they said that if you kept coins in the scrotum, you would always be rich. But it makes sense, because who would ever want to have a coin that you were going to pay, and that's where you reach to grab from, and you just say, "Not forget, you can have it." So you always had some kind of money with you all the time, I suppose. It's an Icelandic tradition. The Icelanders are definitely interesting folk, aren't they? So I'd like to see that. This is in a museum, I believe, in Reykjavik. So there you go on that one. Interesting stuff, huh? Dermal blood vessels will carry nutrients to the upper layers of skin to help the temperature regulate. And what happens is they dilate, and that will give you that reddish look on your face. If you're hot, you're overheated, you get blanched. Not blanched, you get like mottled looking, like splotchy, right? And to be red, overheated. If you're too cold, those vessels will constrict, and it'll pull blood away, and you'll look pale. If you've ever been out and fooling around the snow, and your fingers get real white and like pale, you know, and they're so cold, what'll happen is your blood is rushed to the center. That's the first stages of frostbite and that kind of stuff. Okay, dermis also contains nerve fibers, sensory fibers. Basically, everything is in the dermis. That's one thing I want you guys to understand. Remember, we had the epidermis, okay, the dermis, and the subcutaneous. Right, we have this area, boom, boom, boom. Everything is in the dermis. The epidermis is just those other layers we talked about, the germinativum and spinosum and all that jazz, basale and all these things. Subcutaneous usually has bigger vessels and adipose. Okay, remember adipose is just fat. Okay. Subcutaneous layer is composed of loose connective tissue, insulating fat. It binds the skin to underlying organs, contains blood vessels that supply the skin to the dermis, and everything pops kind of through that area. Now, accessory organs. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to draw you an accessory organ. Now, one of the main accessory organs we have, there we go. Well, I'm going to click off here so I can draw this. One of the main accessory organs you have is going to be a fingernail. Okay, so a fingernail looks kind of like this, right? And it has this little area like that, and here's the rest of our finger. Underneath the nail, so if we draw it from the side, this area here, if we draw it, it goes like this, and it comes back, and it goes this way, and then you have the rest of your finger, and of course you have your fingernail. It goes like this. Underneath it here is this nail bed, and the nail bed is connective tissue. It is holding all of this stuff together all the way up into here. And under here you have what's called this area. This is going to be the matrix of the nail bed. This is where all the growth starts for the fingernail. The fingernail is basically keratinized tissue. It's like skin, but just really, really hard. It would be the cuticle. That's this section right here. So if you want to have the old term, it's EPONYCHIU. Here's the nail itself. And we're going to have the free edge of the nail is out here. That's this free edge. And we're going to have then underneath it, of course, the stratum the strata that we were talking about. Now on the top of the nail, we have this area here. This is called the free edge. This is called the nail. This is called the lunula. So there's the 1, 2, 3, 4 parts of the nail. As they're pushed out, of course, they become keratinized, and that's where we go from there. Other parts of the system too, remember we were talking about the skin, pores, and the follicles, and then we had, of course, the hair. Like here's the root, and the hair goes out like this. And we had these little tiny muscles, which would attach in here, called erector pili. There it is right there. Erector, not E. Okay? And what it does is it pulls that hair this way, and then you end up like this guy or like this. Happens when you're cold or frightened. It's a sympathetic response, so it's kind of a good one to have. It also kind of like holds air in between the hairs and through here, and so you can basically kind of insulate. Brings us up to the hair itself. Shows maturity. This is what hair does. Hair is an accessory, and it does a few different things. It shows maturity, reaching of puberty, and this is where you get ability, therefore shows the ability to mate and conceive. Not all the time. Of course, there's now many variations with that, but let's say in males, it's going to be facial hair and chest or body hair. Okay, and then there's going to be axillary, which is in your armpits, and there's inguinal. And then females, it's the same thing, basically inguinal and axillary. Generally, they don't grow as much hair, but that has to do with the amount of estrogens, okay, and testosterones. Of course, we can change those things if we needed to, with all kinds of chemicals these days. They may hold pheromones, which come from sweat glands to attract mates. They may indicate fertility or virility. Now, other things too. If we're here, we're looking at fertility and virility. We've got to look at a few different things with the body. One of the things too is a flushed skin on the face, which show actually virility. This is basically, you think of health. Okay, if you're good, nice glow to them. They have a nice redness, pinkish to their cheeks, and a redness to their lips. That would show that kind of thing. Now, other parts of the body will become more darker colored. That's going to be the areola around the nipple, and it's going to be some of the genitals will become darker when they're more fertile. That's all that really is. Acts as a cushion, friction reducer for on top of your head. It could be a good cushion, I guess, if you had enough hair. Friction reducer for sure if you're rubbing your arms back and forth or you're running. Things can get pretty chafed, and the hair actually helps things move smoothly. Also indicates overall health if the hair is thick enough, if it's in the right places. For example, like people that are losing their eyebrow hair may have thyroid problems, for example, or eyelashes may show other disease issues. So big, nice eyelashes and big, nice eyebrows are a good thing. They show your virility and fertility, right? They keep critters off you and out of the body. It comes your nose hair, your ear hair, and your eyelashes and all that kind of stuff. And that's why we want to have hair is not bad for us. Now, sometimes you see places where people will remove their hair for whatever reason. Usually it's more aesthetics, but it could be for sometimes to show humbleness. Like monks often will shave their heads, but that's also to keep lice off you, because living with a bunch of other monks in close quarters, there tends to be other bugs that like to hang out on people, and that would be things like lice, which lice are basically, if we took a look at lice, okay, say cooties in the old ways, or also nits. You heard of nitpicker, and you've heard of nitwit, and that has to do with lice, which happen on the head. Hair color is determined by genetics, or sometimes by the packaging that you bought it from. But melanin from melanocytes is responsible for most hair. And here we have different colors of hair. I picked these ones off the web. And so for black hair and brown hair over here, over there. For black and brown hair, it's the eumelanin, and then pheomelanin for the red and blonde hair. And it's just had different amounts in there. And that has to do with genetics. That's all it is. I mean, your parents and your grandparents, your great-grandparents had certain color hair, and that'll show up in you. Same thing with your color of your eyes and everything else. Different types of hair. Okay, hair is again a keratinized tissue, and it isn't really hollow, but it's very porous, and you can get a lot of stuff to stay in it. The flatter, the curlier. So if we take a cross section, so if we take a hair, say like this, and we cut it, we're going to have a cross section. And if it's very round, okay, it's going to be very straight. If it's very like this, it's going to be very curly. Okay, it's just flattened out. Very round, elliptical, ellipses almost like this, very regular. There we go. And African hair, irregular, flattened ellipses. So it may not only have this way, maybe a flattened ellipse like this, but also may look similar to this. Okay, so it has like a different kind of shape to it, and that would give it its curliness, basically. Caucasian, variable, wide range, flat, because they're kind of like you can think of kind of a mix of everything that has gone up, and there's been many variations over many generations. Skin has glands too, so a lot of glands. Okay, they're exocrine. These are called exocrine. They're not endocrine. We'll talk about endocrine when we get into endocrine glands. That's going to be like your pancreas or your kidneys, your adrenals, or endocrine glands. These are exocrine, so they release to the outside. Now they're sebaceous, okay, which make an oil. These are holocrine glands, which means they release the whole cell and it breaks apart, and the oils of the cell become the oils of the product. Basically, this is sebum. And associated with hair follicles and secrete sebum that waterproofs and moisturizes the hair shafts. Now, sweat glands are called sudoriferous, and they're either eccrine, which respond to temperature. So if it gets too hot, you can put a little bit of water out, it evaporates, you feel colder. Or apocrine, which is a piece of the cell breaks off and comes out. And those are used mostly for pheromones, which can show stress or can show arousal or can show fertility, those kind of things. Now, pheromones is a whole different kind of physiology, which we don't really get into this. It's pretty interesting and pretty well, actually not well understood. If we understood it better, we'd be much better at making them and using them. So I don't know, maybe some people are. I don't know, but there's a lot of really interesting research on sweat and what it does and stuff. Now, modified sweat glands, called Serous glands, in here secrete wax. Now, the increase in wax shows an increase in stress. Okay, so we want to have those. Now, the last ones are called mammary glands, and that's in the breast tissue of the female, and those are actually modified sweat glands. They produce milk. So every time you drink milk, you're drinking cow sweat. How does that grab you? Yuck. Inflammation. Generally, there's 4 parts. Okay, so we're going to have edema, which is swelling. Okay, now let's say you scratch yourself. So it's going to, like, you put a mark with a thorn across you. It says swell. It's going to hit rubor. Now these ones are the Latin term. These are going to be the common term. Rubor is redness. Okay, and then we're going to have calor, as in calorie, which is heat. And then the last one, you're going to have dolor, which equals pain. Okay, and these are the hallmarks. These are the 4 hallmarks of inflammation. Okay, 4 hallmarks. Okay, now the red swollen is a normal response to injury, and a couple things happen when that occurs. When you have this entire thing, your body's going to release endorphins. Okay, endorphins are INGs. Endorphins are like internal morphines. They're painkillers. You're also going to release histamines, which increase inflammation and they help with the healing process. And you're going to have histamines, endorphins, and heparin. Heparin helps with blood clotting, helps blood get there. Actually, is what heparin actually does. Has to do with healing of the tissues. Now we see this especially in acupuncture, where we have a little red dot when we put the needle in there, and sometimes it'll feel warm, but very barely. There is, of course, some pain and maybe a little bit of heat and sometimes some swelling. That shows an increase in the inflammation response in some people, and sometimes that can be good or sometimes it can be bad. Some people have none at all, and that's not good. So you don't want to have something going on there. So that's the basics of healings and wounds and stuff like that. Now when we get to wounds, we have to also talk about burn coverage, okay? And we have what is called the rule of nines, okay? And what happens is different parts of the body, so each area of the body will have a value of like 9, and so different areas have more, different areas have less, and it's called the rule of nines, and that's for burn coverage. We don't have to really know that for this class, but it's a good thing if you want to go look it up. Now, finally, we talk about tattoos. Now, tattoos are pretty interesting. Usually they were used to significant, and they had some significance. You would get them as a tribal idea or as a clan idea, some kind of markings. Now, back in about the early 80s, I think it was, in the Alps, there was a body found in the ice, and it was this guy, Ötzi, O-T-Z-I, this is dude right here, and he had some tattoos on his back and on his ankles, like this girl does here. She had them done like that because it was cool and groovy, but he probably had them done for an actual reason. About 5,200 years ago, this guy was walking around, got shot with an arrow, fell down, froze to death or died, whatever, and then they found all his stuff with him, and his skin was still intact, which is pretty unusual. 5,200 years is a long time. Now, these points actually follow acupuncture points. Acupuncture points for low back pain. Turns out he had low back degeneration, and the points on his ankle were also for like sciatica. So it's kind of an interesting kind of thing that when they went and looked at this, they were able to see how much maybe the tattoos were designed for different reasons, and this one was for health reasons. Now, they did do samples of the ink, and I believe that some of it was from charcoal that was made from herbs and twigs or whatever it is, some herbal stuff that is known for pain. So maybe the first like fentanyl patch, I think, is what this guy kind of was. Now here, the tattoos actually don't go in the epidermis because that sloughs off, right? So it goes into the dermis. That's that second layer, and the cells there are a little bit more stable. They take longer to move. Now they still have some fading over time, depending on how deep and how good quality the ink is that you get a tattoo with. Okay, other things, other tattoos too. These are less auspicious ones because people get them for all kinds of cool and fun reasons. You can look up tons of them and maybe even have some. They're neat colors and neat designs and have some significance for you. But some people had tattoos only put on them if they could work, and that has to do with these folks here, the Jews that were placed in the Auschwitz and Birkenau. In 1940s, early 40s. Now, they were given tattoos if they were able to work. If they weren't able to work, they were tattooed, and they ended up dying and being cremated. And this we all know about from the concentration camp. Now, tattoos nowadays are for good luck a lot of times. Now, nautical tattoos, now you'd see different tattoos. Sailors who did more than 5,000 miles would get a little bluebird, maybe on their shoulder, a bluebird on their shoulder, because it shows you're close to land. And sometimes they would have like chickens tattooed on their feet, because one of the things they would find is in shipwrecks, their wreckage would be floating, and chickens would be floating on top and surviving, which was weird because then they ended up probably getting eaten. So you weren't really too much good there, was it? Ugh. A lot of reasons for tattoos. Some people get a compass so that they're never lost, etc. And some people get anchors for different reasons. And there's all kinds of different traditional reasons. And some of them pretty cool. I mean, some people get too many tattoos, but that's totally their choice. And it's they're very stable now and very safe. Used to be done with like a hook. Scars are natural trauma response. There's different kinds of scars. Generally scars have no sweat glands. So people with like large burn areas may have problems with sweating. They may have problems with getting too cold, so they have to be careful of those kind of things. Keloid scars are more common in darker people, but you will see them in white-skinned people in this area if they've had a tracheotomy to help them breathe after an injury. But and some places will use them as scarring for social status or even initiation, or even for beauty. They'll have the little whatever's put on their face and their body. Okay, clean tribe members in those days and in those places, you may not be able to sing certain songs or go to certain things and participate in certain things because you don't have the right kind of tattoos. So let's do a real quick review. It's been about an hour. Sorry about that. It's a long time for this class, but it's a good class, so we have lots to say. Skin. So first, go ahead and like and share. Hit that like button. Hit that sucker, because that helps me figure out what to do next and how to do things next. Subscribe if you want to see more. And comment if you have any tattoos and what would they like, or comment if you have any scars that are interesting. Skin has many functions. We talked about some of the functions they have. They have 3 distinct layers. We talked about those 3 layers, which you can go back and look at that. Keratin we discussed, which is that waterproofing protein chemical. And then we talked about melanin, which gives you your skin color, and the accessories, which are the hair and the nails and other decorations, which talked about those. And that's about it. So you guys, thanks so much for watching. Everything in here, any of the diagrams or anything are mine, of course, because we just drew them. But any of the pictures or photographs or anything like that are just for, those are for educational purposes. And so they shouldn't be under copyright law. Anyway, this is Dr. Sean. I hope you guys learned something. Hope that was interesting. Took notes. There's a lot in there. That's from 4 different books. And so we'll talk to you later. See ya. Bye.